Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining. Hopefully, there's probably other things you'd probably be doing on your Friday night, but we are here where we are. I really do hope you get some value from this session today, that you can sort of take forward and hopefully support yourself as well as your children through this lockdown. Hopefully, short lockdown. He says with his fingers crossed. So. My name's Steve. I'm one of the wellbeing facilitators at iListen, and I'll tell you a little bit more about what I do going forward. And I'm also joined today by Lindsay Christian, who's a child and adolescent psychotherapist.
Good evening, everybody. It's lovely to see so many people joined up and wanting to gain some more information. So really hope that you enjoy this evening. You go away with some ideas to help the children in your lives.
Thanks, Lindsay. So this is our second webinar. We did a webinar yesterday, which was more aimed at our primary school young people. And this one's obviously pitched a little bit higher. But some of the content we'll go through today will be quite similar to yesterday because it's quite relevant as well. As you probably realised, I have placed everyone on mute, the reason for obvious reasons really, stop any background noise. But you can still get involved. So you all located the chat function quite easily before when I asked if you could hear me. If you do have any questions, please feel free to drop any questions in that chat. And if you send it to the panelists, they'll come to myself and Lindsay, and we will answer them questions at the end, if that's okay. What I would say is if you've got anything of a sensitive nature, maybe rather than popping it in the chat, our email address will be at the end. So if you'd like to email us, we can pick that up with you individually to deal with any of the questions or concerns you may have. Okay, so yeah, find ourselves in our second lockdown, unfortunately. It can be a challenging time for yourselves as parents as well, for your young people. So the format of this webinar will be that I'm going to give you a little bit of an intro into what iListen do. I'm conscious some of you may know that, but I'm also conscious that some of you may not know that. Who are iListen? What do they actually do? And how do they support schools on the island and stuff like that? So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And then I'm going to pass you on to Lindsay, who's going to talk to you about supporting yourself and also supporting your young people through these tough times. Okay. Hopefully, fingers crossed, the connection stays good and it runs quite seamlessly. So, who are iListen? Well, iListen is a charitable initiative. So 37 years ago, MCH Psychological Services was founded, so more better known as Manx Cancer Help at the time. And it was set up for those patients who'd been diagnosed with cancer to offer psychological support to them. Over recent years, we realised that we had the skills and expertise where we could actually complement that charity with this initiative, iListen. And iListen was born just over 2 years ago. And the idea is that we can help young people with their mental health, really, and support the community in a wider reaching capacity around mental health. We are early intervention in schools, and what that means is we're there to get young people to start thinking about their feelings. You know, we all experience positive and negative emotions, and it's about dealing with them appropriately. So it's really breaking down that stigma. Just to give you a little bit of perspective around how mental health works, it's tiered 1 to 5, with level 5 being your more serious cases of mental health issues, and level 1 being at the bottom. And just to show you where we are at the bottom with level 1, with early intervention and prevention. We believe in starting these conversations early, equipping young people with tools and techniques that they can take forward into their lives to support their mental health. We're also an evidence-based service, and what I mean by that is we have clinicians that work at iListen that oversee everything we do. So our clinical lead consultant, clinical psychologist, Professor Robin Davidson, overlooks the whole service. But just like I'm joined today by Lindsay, who's a qualified psychotherapist, we also have qualified counsellors. So all the work we do in schools with young people and potentially your children, depending on what school they go to, is all overseen. So it's got that clinical backing. So today I'm going to largely focus this around the schools, because obviously that's more where we're here to try and support you and your children, and you know, the schools obviously is a good place to give you a little bit more information about. But we do also operate in the workplace and the community. So with regard to the schools, I'll give you a little bit more information on the next slide. We do bits of work in the workplace, which is really, really beneficial. So we do all sorts of different topics around mental health. It could be that we work specifically with one organisation and we offer different bits of content for that organisation to work with them. So we've done online training for them. We do face-to-face stuff and bits and bobs like that. And we also run open courses as well. So people from different organisations can come and join them, which has been really beneficial for them organisations. We also work in the community. So last summer, we did some sessions for young people that was based around art therapy. So really fun, interactive sessions, but actually gives people a taste of how do they feel when they're doing that, which ultimately supports their mental health. And we also did some work with some focus groups at the end of the year around some specific topics as well. And 2021, we hope to get out into the community a little bit more around that. So really powerful statistic for you here. So 1 in 8 5 to 19-year-olds have a mental health problem. 50% of all adult mental health problems are developed by the age of 14 and 75% by the age of 24. So this was taken from the UK Mental Health Foundation 2018. And I'm sure you'll all agree with me, that's quite a staggering statistic. And it just shows the importance of starting these conversations early in child's lives, really, because the sooner we remove that stigma, we talk about them, talk about emotions, talk about feelings, hopefully we can help support them going through things, because life can usually get a little bit more stressful as kids get older. So I briefly talked about schools, and I'm going to tell you how we operate in the schools. So we currently support QE2, King William's College, Ramsey Grammar, Hague, and St Ninians. We were able, in our pilot year started 2 years ago, and that was with King William's College and QE2. Our team has expanded over the last 12 months, which has allowed us to take on more schools. We would love our service to be in all schools, but obviously as the service grows, we have to take bits on as we go. But in these schools, we offer basically two types of service, really. And first is what our wellbeing facilitators do. So this is myself and a small team. And we basically go into schools, we deliver assemblies, PSHE lessons. So this is like that classroom setting, 40, 50-minute sessions. And we do workshops as well. And we cover a variety of different subjects. I've got on there, we work collaboratively because each school's different. Each year is different, each group within each year is different, and they all have very different challenges. So we don't just turn up to a school with a criteria of what we're going to deliver. I work very closely with school heads, year heads, and key stage heads to find out actually what's going on in that school. You know, is there elements of bullying? Is it something to do with friendships, relationships, positive and negative coping strategies? We've covered lots of different stuff, and we tailor that content to make sure it's beneficial to the school, but most importantly, it's beneficial to potentially your children, the students. The other service we offer, so in an ideal world, some of the stuff we do in the schools we'd hope would be enough, and it is sometimes. Some people just need that session around a specific subject. They feel much better with it, and they feel in control of their emotions, but sometimes they just need a little bit more support, and that's where our listening service can come in. So our listening service is a one-to-one, safe, non-judgmental and confidential space for potentially your children to come and talk to one of our listeners. Okay, I've said it's confidential. The only time we'd break that confidentiality is if your child or someone was at risk of direct harm. We would break that, and then we would obviously follow a safeguarding process to make sure that their well-being is looked after. For the majority of our schools, the referral process is through a teacher, but some schools do have a self-referral process where a student can refer directly into us. And our listeners are in each of them schools on a weekly basis, okay? So they may come and see our listeners once, and again, have a conversation, and that's enough. Other times they might need 2, 3, 4 or 5, 6 sessions to make sure that it just depends what comes up, really. And we work very closely with the listening service as wellbeing facilitators, because obviously if there's trends coming out from certain years or certain schools, and we know that we can create some stuff to try and support them, we work very closely with them. I mentioned before about us being early intervention, which is absolutely correct. And all our listeners are very aware of the signposting process. So actually, if someone comes to see one of our listeners and it's not really level 1, it's not really early intervention, potentially something's happening at home or something quite serious is happening in their life, we know how to signpost them to the correct service, and we'd support them in doing that as well. So all our listeners receive 90 minutes clinical supervision each week, which is really, really important to make sure that we're supporting them, and ultimately that everything we do is evidence-based, as I said at the start. So not all our listeners aren't psychologists or psychotherapists. They're working towards these qualifications, but with our clinical guidance and support, we find this model works really, really well for early intervention support in schools. Just to give you some statistics on what's happened, this is the first term, so this is September through to December. So the wellbeing facilitators have delivered 56 sessions. So they, like I said, could be assemblies, interactive classroom sessions, workshops, and there's been over 4,100 pupil interactions. So that's not the number of pupils. The number of pupils is around 2,600. And the reason the interactions is higher is because in some schools we see the pupils more than once. So to give you a little bit of an example of how that would work, we may be able to arrange an assembly where we come in and talk about a specific topic, but actually how much do you learn in a 15-20 minute assembly? So we like to follow that up with an interactive session and get the kids involved, talking about it and stuff like that. And then we also might follow up again with something to do in their tutor, for example, like a reflective task or something like that, because we find whatever the subject is, we see them 2 or 3 times, we find that's where we see the real value in what we're trying to support them with. Our listening service have seen 95 pupils between September and December. So like I said before, some of them pupils have only needed 1 session, some have needed 2. It just depends really. But I just thought that'd be nice to share with you. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of an insight into some of the things we've seen this year. Lindsay will go into a little bit more detail around potentially how to deal with some of this stuff, but we'll just briefly touch on some of these bits. So as you can imagine, some of the things we see is around exam stress. A lot of the students, it's great that students want to do well, they want to do their best, they've got aims and goals of what they want to achieve, but a lot of them put a lot of pressure on themselves, which ultimately means it can sometimes give them quite negative thoughts or a lot of concern and worry. So we know the schools are there to support students with exams and stuff like that, but we try and complement the schools by offering advice and doing sessions on maybe creating a routine. What can you actually control? Are you actually worrying about something that you can't influence and stuff like that? So just testing their thought process really. And the uncertainty, we're in our second lockdown, and the first lockdown was a very stressful time for some pupils, but we're in lockdown again. Are exams going to go ahead? Aren't they going to go ahead? If they go ahead, have they been in the right mindset to really apply themselves to the studying? If they don't go ahead, are they going to get the grades they feel that they deserve? So you can clearly see that there's a lot of worry and concern there. We also see different types of self-harm. So self-harm around eating and under-eating and overeating, lack of sleep, and also physical harm, whether that's scratching, cutting and stuff like that. And what I'd say about this is a lot of people think that self-harm is attention seeking, but actually it's not. It actually does work. It can release, and Lindsay will probably give you a little bit more information about that. But in the moment, it does work. It takes people out of their head. But unfortunately, these are probably classed as negative coping strategies. So what we try and do is look at positive ways of dealing with things. So rather than them 3, could they look at healthy eating, exercise, soothing techniques, relaxation, and stuff like that. So just trying to get people to talk around that. They may not work in the moment like some of the negative ones do, but they're much more healthier and sustainable going forward. The other things we see, just categorised as sort of general concerns, social media. So, it's got a real value at the moment, allowing people to keep in touch with each other, which is a really, really important thing. But we do hear of a lot of bullying going on social media. What is the content people are actually looking at? Is it content that's getting them down and stuff like that? So we've done stuff around curating your own content, really. What are you putting out on there? What are you looking at? How does it make you feel and stuff like that? Friendships and relationships was a big one. So we spent a lot of time working with year 7 and year 8 for the first term of this year. Year 7 was a very tricky year. They didn't finish year 6. They've then gone into year 7. They've then potentially created new friends. But actually, what you find is they make these friends at the start of the year. When you get sort of November, December time, they might be questioning that. You know, are these the friends that are going to be there long term? And if they're not, that's absolutely fine. But how do they deal with that appropriately? So we've done lots of sessions around that. And we also just find stuff around responsibility. So general responsibility. So whether that ties in with exam stress or thinking, you know, I'm in year 11, year 12 now, year 13, what's next for me? Them types of worries, more responsibility in life in general outside of school. You know, there's all sorts of stuff that tie into that one. You know, there's hormones and stuff like that. You know, it's a difficult time for them. So that's just it's not an exhaustive list, but I just thought I'd share some of the bits we've seen just to give you a little bit of awareness around that. So thank you for listening around I'll Listen. I hope you found that beneficial if you didn't know that. And now I'm going to pass you on to Lindsay, who's going to talk to you a little bit more around supporting each other. But just before I do that, just a reminder, if you do have any questions, please just pop them in the chat and we'll have a look at them at the end. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Steve, and thanks for giving that insight into I'll Listen, especially for those parents that maybe haven't come across the initiative as yet. I think that's really important. So thanks very much for that. So this evening, I'm just going to touch on a few key points, really. So first, we're going to look at what you might see as parents, basically, with your young people. So some of the behaviours and some of the things that you might see. We're going to then talk a little bit about supporting your child during lockdown, some sort of hints and tips, really. Then we're going to think about actually looking after yourselves as parents, because this is a really difficult time, and you know, you do need to look after yourselves as parents. And then we're going to look at some practical ways, I suppose, of helping your young person in your life, so your child or your children. So that's really the format. And like Steve says, if anybody's got any questions, please just stick them in the chat and we'll speak about them at the end. So some of the things that you might see as parents, and the things that we're going to speak about are things that have come up in sessions with people that we've come into contact with young people we've come into contact with. But again, the list isn't exhaustive. There's a whole array of things that you might actually see, but I suppose these are some of the more prevalent and the things that you might see. So changes in mood. So that's really all encompassing. It could be something very, very, what you would perhaps deem as insignificant or small changes, to like real massive changes with mood. So it might be that your child goes from being somebody who's quite sort of positive and happy and outgoing to somebody that's actually really quite sad, really quite low in mood, fretting, worrying, quite anxious, you know, sense of panic maybe over things. They're the types of things that you might see in a mood. So it could be something that's quite subtle with the change in their mood, but again, it could be something, you know, something really quite noticeable. In terms of changes in behaviour, again, that's a whole array of things. It might be that your child becomes more irritable, that their sort of likes and dislikes change quite considerably. There might be quite significant changes to personality. Again, some of these things might be significant, but there might be just subtle changes. But I suppose for me, it's about just keeping an eye on some of those subtle changes, because actually it might be that they're indicative of something more that's going on for your child. Increased social isolation. Obviously, it's really difficult at the minute because we're working within the confines of the government rules and regulations, and so we can't be as socially active as we were before lockdown. But I suppose for the increased social isolation, it might be that they're sort of not wanting to spend as much time with you as a family. They might be keeping themselves in their bedrooms a little bit more. They might not want to sort of interact with friends and family through social media or the telephone. And they might start just keeping themselves to themselves a little bit more, and you might start noticing that more. And again, that could be something that's quite subtle. You might think it's just being teenager, and actually it might be, but it could be indicative of something more that's happening there. disturbed sleep patterns. So teenagers love their sleep, we all know that, and actually their bodies do need more sleep. But what you might see is changes to their sleep patterns, so sleeping more or sleeping less, sort of because of their routine being a little bit out of sync. It might be that they're sleeping more during the day and awake during the night. It might be things like nightmares, so waking up at night. There can be a whole host of things, really. So it's about just keeping an eye on some of the things that you might see in terms of disturbed sleep patterns. In terms of eating problems, so they can be seemingly quite minor things, such as maybe just skipping the odd meal, or perhaps not having the best diet at the moment because routine is out of the window, and so they might be craving more sort of sugary and carbs, especially if their sleep has altered and they're perhaps a little bit more tired. Eating as well is usually quite indicative of things that are going on for their emotions. So, you know, I think we've probably all been guilty of a bit of comfort eating now and again. You know, if you're feeling a bit sad, or you know, you're a bit angry, or you're a bit low in mood, you tend to go for something that's quite sweet to sort of fill that hole. And actually, you know, we're all guilty of that. But again, it could be something that's just a one-off, or happens just occasionally. But it could be something that's actually showing that there's more to it. I suppose on the sort of spectrum, at the other end of things, it could be to do with starving, purging, gorging food, you know, secret eating, stashing food secretly. Those, I suppose, are the things on towards the more serious end of things. Although, to be honest, I've been guilty of stashing a chocolate biscuit away from my partner before now, but that doesn't mean I've got a serious eating problem. But it's just to show you that there is as with anything, there is a spectrum. And actually, it's just about being aware of some of these things. And that's what today is about. It's about giving you as parents that more awareness, actually, of some of the things that might be happening and some of the things that you might see. So low self-esteem. I think, again, we've all had a bit of low self-esteem occasionally, you know, in different circumstances. But it might be that they start questioning their ability to do things. I think I'm probably especially thinking around exams, because I know that obviously that's a real big worry for a lot of children at the moment around exams. They might start questioning, actually, am I good enough? Am I going to achieve? How worthy am I? What kind of person am I? I'm a good person. Am I not a good person? They might start having those sorts of questions. Losing interest in hobbies, and I suppose again that's really difficult because of lockdown, and lots of hobbies involve being out and about and socially interactive with other people, which we can't do. But it might be that actually, for those hobbies that you can do within the confines of your home or your garden, if you're lucky enough to have one, they actually might decide, actually, well, when lockdown's over, I don't want to go back to dance, or I don't want to go back to cycling, or I'm going to take a break from athletics, actually. And that can be okay. You know, we're allowed to have breaks from things, but it might be that actually that's showing actually that there's something else going on for your young person. And that could quite easily be linked with the low self-esteem. So Steve spoke a little bit about some of the coping strategies and some of the things that we've seen within schools within the first term of school. So maladaptive coping strategies are what we would necessarily sort of see as negative coping strategies. But what I would say with all coping strategies, they serve a purpose. So even though they may be something that doesn't sit quite right with us, or might be a bit scary, or might be seen as negative, they serve a purpose in that moment for that person. But they're deemed as maladaptive because there's possibly a more positive way of dealing with certain emotions. And so some of the things that you might see, so again, it's a spectrum. So some of the lesser things that you might see might be around sleep, so not wanting to sleep as much or sleeping too much. Might be a little bit of pinching, superficial scratching on any part of the body. It's usually more common on the arms, the forearms, the stomach, the torso, and the legs, just because it's easier to hide those areas. It might be things like hair pulling or eyelash pulling. They're sort of, I suppose, at the lesser end, and I suppose up at the other end would maybe be some more serious things, would be like serious deep cuts, things like that. I suppose some of the other things might be around drinking, smoking, drug taking. They would all be classed as maladaptive coping strategies. And part of the work that we do is around enabling children and young people to speak about their coping strategies, and actually for us to help them build more positive coping strategies, like Steve said, so things that will enable them and build on for future to come. So they're just some of the things that you might see. Again, the list isn't exhaustive, so there might be other things, but these are sort of typically the things that you might see more commonly. So if we think about supporting children during lockdown, so again, this list is not exhaustive, but these are really the things that we think as therapists are really, really important. And actually, even if you took a few of these things away today, from each of the sort of topics that we're looking at, that's absolutely brilliant. So one of the most important things is to openly communicate. It is so important that children and young people feel listened to, that they feel that they can come and speak to their parents, that they feel that their parents are interested, and that they really have got an interest in their lives. That is so, so important. And it can be really difficult, especially with teenagers who, don't want to talk about their emotions a lot of the time and don't really want to interact. It can be really difficult to have those open conversations. But I suppose for me, point 1 and 2 there really go together. So about the open communication and the checking in every day. So it's really important at the moment in particular to try and check in with your young person every day, even if it's literally 5 minutes, where you sit down and just say, how are you? How are things? What have you got on for the day today? What study have you got to do? How are you feeling about that? Is there anything I can help you with? Is there any additional help you maybe need from your teachers? It's just about having those conversations. You don't have to go into, any great depth and be there for hours and hours on end. It can literally be one sentence that opens up a whole conversation. But the important thing is that a child knows that they have got that ability to come and speak to you, and they know that you're going to listen. And I think around that as well is that obviously we are in unprecedented times at the moment, and as parents you're trying to juggle probably 100 things at once. You might have a mixture of ages of children, and you might be trying to teach primary and secondary children, keeping down a job, looking after the house, getting your dog out for a walk, keeping your mental health in check. You're probably wearing a whole array of hats and trying to do a whole array of tasks. But it's about having some protected time each day for your child. So if you know that you want to have a little bit of a conversation with your young person, but actually there's a chance that you're going to get a phone call from work at any given moment, or you're going to get pulled into something. And I know things do come out unexpectedly sometimes, and we haven't got any control over that. But if you can set aside some protected time each day where your child really feels listened to, where there's no distractions, where they feel it's a safe space that they can actually say exactly how they're thinking and feeling, that will really benefit them. So that is one of the absolute most important things that I would really encourage you to try and do as parents. And acknowledging and validating feelings. So I think it's probably quite easy that when a young person says something about how they're feeling, it's quite easy to jump to judgments. We're all guilty of it. I've done it myself. If a young person says, I'm feeling really down, or I'm feeling really angry, or, I just can't go on anymore. These types of things, actually for them, it's real. And it's really easy for us as adults to go, but what have you got to be worried about? What have you got to be sad about? Well, why? Just get on with it. Those types of things in the moment, especially if we're stressed or we're trying to deal with lots of things. But actually, one of a really important thing you can do for your young person is actually to acknowledge and validate their feelings, because in that moment for them, those feelings are absolutely real. They're real for them, and that is the important thing. So actually saying, I really hear you, or why do you feel like that? or what can we do to help you manage those feelings? So really validating and acknowledging those feelings as real for your young person in that moment is really, really important. Active parenting. So what I mean by that is that children and young people, they learn from watching other people. Absolutely learn. Obviously we're talking, your parents of secondary age children now, but when your children were younger, there was probably occasions when you thought, oh my goodness, she's doing that or he's doing that, and that's just like X, Y, and Z. Because actually children learn from watching people, and usually the primary caregivers, the parents, mums and dads. So active parenting is very much around, if you want your young person to do something, rather than just saying, you need to do this, get on with that, you've got this to do. If you're able to actually, be alongside them, and even for 5 minutes, literally 5 minutes, to sit down with them, get their books out, what are you doing today, what do you need to do, show me what you've got to do. So actually actively being there around them, showing them, being alongside them is really important. You'll get less of the, oh my God, you're nagging me type of comments that you probably all, used to, especially from teenagers. So active parenting is about being alongside your child, and actually just taking 5 minutes out just to see what they're doing. So the next 2 points really sort of go hand in hand. It's about not being too prescriptive and trying to keep a routine as much as possible. So obviously you're probably wearing several hats, like we said, trying to juggle lots of things. At school, part of the school day is obviously it's routine, it's set subjects for set amount of times, it's a set day at school. It's completely different to being at home. Yes, try and keep a routine as much as possible. If you can sort of try and get your young person sort of up around the same sort of time each day, and to finish their schoolwork at a sort of regular time each day, brilliant. Meal times, that type of thing, bedtime, routine, try and keep it as much as possible. However, we are all doing the best that we can, and we are all juggling lots of things. So actually, if we don't stick to a routine 100% of the time, it's fine. Flexibility is good, because there's going to be things that are going to get in the way. There's going to be curveballs that are going to be thrown. And actually, flexibility is good. We don't have to have our child sat there from 9 till 3:30 every day doing their schoolwork. You absolutely don't. It is about encouraging some flexibility, and we're going to speak about that a little bit more in terms of like the practical elements of what you can do to help your child. But keep a routine, but allow that flexibility, and don't be too prescriptive. So actually have that flexibility. Ask your child, what they want their day to look like, what have they got on. It's about them taking a little bit of responsibility. So embrace the flexibility is what I would say, because actually at some point children are going to go back to school and they're not going to have that flexibility as much. So embrace it now whilst you've got the chance. Take time out to have fun. Absolutely. Obviously, we're sort of restricted in terms of what we can do, outside wise. We're only allowed outside, for one piece of exercise a day. But, get outside, go and have fun, do things together as a family. Do all sorts of things. You can literally do whatever you want to do. It can be things like baking, film nights. It could be, going on a bike ride together or a walk together. Take time out to have fun as a family, with your child. Do whatever it is that works for your family, to have some fun. But getting outside as well is really, really important. Yes, we are more restricted and more limited in that, but there are lots of places around where we haven't got to travel very far to get to somewhere that's that's nice to go and explore. So it is about just getting outside and doing something, whether that's like I say, a walk or a jog or a cycle. Just getting outside and getting some fresh air is really important. Especially now, we're probably more thankful for getting outside more now than ever. So it is really important that you get out and have that time outside. And asking for help. So teachers, okay, so children aren't in schools, but teachers are there still on hand, and I know some lessons are going ahead sort of virtually. Teachers are there to help at the end of the day. They might not be there physically, but actually they are still there on the end of a video call or a telephone call or an email. Teachers are there to help. Yes, there's a lot of uncertainty at the minute around lots of different things to do with school. but reach out to the teachers, reach out and actually get some help if you need. And actually, I suppose it's about asking for help from other parents that actually might be going through a similar situation, but might be too scared to actually, say how they're feeling and what they're seeing. Reach out to other parents. There's lots of groups on social media as well that you might be able to get support from, but there is always help, is what I would say. Looking after yourselves as parents. This is absolutely imperative that you look after yourselves as parents. You are out of your comfort zones, most of you, unless you're a teacher, you're not a teacher. So actually, everybody's just doing the best that they can. So I think it is about being realistic about what you're going to achieve in a day. Chances are you're not going to get your young person to sit down from 9 till 3:30, and actually, that's fine. Be realistic, set achievable goals. As long as your child's work's done for that day, do you need to do more? Can you let them have a bit of free time? Be realistic in what you're going to achieve. I think if you start trying to put too much pressure on your young person and you have unachievable goals, you're on a highway to nowhere, really, and you're going to find that really difficult, and you're going to come up against a lot of sort of negative things from your young person. So be realistic about actually what you're going to achieve in a day. Acknowledge feelings. So acknowledge your feelings as a parent trying to juggle a whole host of things. And we spoke about that before. You're probably wearing several hats. You're probably trying to juggle work and maybe different age children, and you might be, living somewhere that hasn't got an outside space. There might be ill health. There could be a whole array of things, and actually it's really difficult. We're in really difficult times at the moment, and it's about acknowledging your feelings. And it might be really difficult to acknowledge those feelings, but actually it's okay to have them. We all have really difficult feelings, whether they're, really happy feelings or, really sad feelings. And actually you probably have a whole array of feelings on any given day. It's probably a bit like an emotional roller coaster at times, but acknowledge those feelings. It's okay to have them at the end of the day. We're all just trying to do the best that we can. Comparison is the thief of all joy. Absolutely. It's really easy for us to sit and look, especially on things like social media, or if we've got friends with children of similar ages, and think, oh, Dave up the road or Sally down the road has got, they're doing this, that, and the other with their children. They've got them doing, 10 different tasks a day, and they're doing this and they're doing that. And it's great for Bill and Sally and whoever else that, it's great. It works for them as a family, but actually focus on yourselves as a family. What works for you? What works for you as a unit? What works for you with all of the added pressures you've got? What works for you with your values? We're all different at the end of the day, and it's really easy to compare ourselves, but actually just focus on yourself as a family unit. You're doing the best you can, and actually what works for somebody won't work for somebody else, and that's okay. Take time out for yourself each day. Really, really important. This can be literally 10 minutes in a day, and I suppose I'm thinking of perhaps maybe single parent families, or maybe if you've got a partner that's still going out to work and you're in the house with your child or your children, that can be a little bit more difficult, but it could be literally 10 minutes. It could be 10 minutes where you take yourself to another room and sit and listen to some music, read a book for 10 minutes, have a cup of tea. If you're fortunate enough to have some outside space, it might be going and standing in the garden. I know obviously we're in the midst of winter and it's not exactly warm outside, but going and grabbing some fresh air. If you've got a little bit more time, it might be that you go and take a bubble bath, that you get outside for some exercise independently. It might be that you have to actually wait until your child or your children go to bed to get that time to yourself, and that's okay. But as long as you carve a little bit of time out for yourselves each day, that's really important. It's self-care, and actually everybody needs self-care. And if you're not able to look after yourself, you're not going to be in a position to physically and emotionally look after anybody else. So it's really important that you do take care of yourself. Be kind to yourselves. I said this before, we're all trying to do the best that we can within the confines of what we're given. Unless you're a teacher, we're not teachers. I couldn't think of anything worse than trying to teach a child at the moment. but actually we're just trying to do the best we can. If things don't go, according to plan, if there's a few curveballs thrown in, it's okay. It's really okay. Just be kind to yourself. You're doing the best you can, and that really is all that anybody could actually ask from you. Stay connected with people. So it might be that you actually schedule a phone call or a video call in with friends and family every day, every other day, once a week, whatever works for you. And I would say that that's the same for your young person as well. So it might be that you schedule in, video calls or phone calls to their friends, to family members that perhaps you haven't got contact with, grandparents, brothers, sisters, aunties, uncles, those types of things. But staying connected is really important. It's about staying connected to friends and family, whether that's, through whatever medium. There's obviously lots of, online support, that you might stay connected through online groups, that type of thing, but stay connected with people in whatever way works for you as an individual and works for you as a family. And seek help if needed. So I'm specifically talking about you as a parent now. So speak to your partner if you've got one. Speak to, other parents, to friends, to family. Reach out to somebody. There's lots of online groups. There's lots of things on social media that you can tap into. GPs are still there. So actually, if it's something really around your mental health as a parent, seek help. Speak to somebody. There is always somebody there that's willing to listen. So don't ever feel like you're alone, because you're not. There will always be somebody, whether that's professional or family and friends, but there is always somebody. So some of the practical ideas, and a lot of these practical ideas have come from the I Listen team that have got older children. So some of the things that so they're tried and tested, basically. So some of the things are around encouraging your child to learn from the experience of the last lockdown. Obviously, we're in a second lockdown, so get them to think about actually what worked for them last time. How did they cope with things last time? What was good and what wasn't so good? What things could they tap into that was really good for them last time? So get them to really think about actually first lockdown, what was that like? What were the good points? What weren't the good points? And actually learn from those experiences and put some of those things into practice. Because I think, we were in lockdown first time around for a lot longer than we currently are. And that was a time of real sort of learning and experience for a lot of young people, for a lot of adults, to be honest. So get them to think about actually what they learned last time in lockdown and try and apply some of those things. Help make a plan that suits them. The next 2 points go together. So basically, what works for them. So actually, is sitting down from 9 till 3:30 or whatever their school hours were, is that going to work for them? Do they want to do that? Actually, is that going to be counterproductive? What do they want their day to look like? Do they want to maybe get outside during the day, actually, when it's light out there and that they can get some fresh air, and then maybe do some of their work a bit later in the night? Do they want to split their day? Do they want to add some sort of practical elements into it? Learning new tasks, and we'll speak about that later on, about the increased responsibilities and tasks. But asking your young person, what would they like their day to look like? Obviously, you might get some children to say, well, actually, I just don't want to do any schoolwork. Well, that's great, but actually they've got to do some elements of it. But it's about giving them a bit more ownership, and for them to be a bit more resilient and independent, actually, in how they would like their day. And that goes along the same lines as the flexibility, to actually be a bit more flexible in your approach, what their day looks like. It might be that they split their time up a little bit more during the day. Like I say, it might be that they work for part of the day, you go out during the day, and then they come back to their work at night time. It's whatever works for them, actually, at the moment. Spend time together. Really, really crucial. If you've got time, please spend time together, even if it is just half an hour. Obviously, I know that there's a lot more sort of stress and strain on parents at the moment, especially being, all cooped up in houses together. But spend time together and have fun. Do things that you wouldn't normally do. So some of my friends that have got older children have been doing things like teaching them classic games that maybe they've never come into contact with. Lots of children now, if you say to them about playing a game, they might get their Xbox out or their PlayStation out, but actually getting board games out. So my friends have been teaching their children things like Monopoly and Articulate and Uno and Cluedo, games that even at sort of 16, 17, they've never played. So they've been having like games nights and film nights and, doing all sorts of things like that. It might be that, your young person's got a real love of baking or cooking, and actually it might be that you do that together, you do meals together. And it could be that actually some of that spending time together encompasses some of their learning as well. So it might be that you can encompass some new skills and new tasks into their learning. Get outside. Obviously, we are more restricted, but absolutely take up the opportunity to get outside now that we can and whilst we can. We don't know when things might change. We don't know when things might go back to a sense of normality, but actually get outside with your young person, really encourage them to get outside and get that vitamin D. Be friendly when you're out and about and see people. And this was something that a friend of mine said earlier in the week, that actually there's a lot of scare at the minute around, people wearing masks and having to be socially distanced. And, when I've been out on walks and people have sort of lunged into hedges and, there is a lot of scare out there at the minute. And I think, we're a race of human connectedness. We want to be connected to people. We need that social interaction. There's so much to be said for actually just when you go past someone saying hi to them, or how are you doing? You don't have to strike up a conversation, but you might do, providing you're 2 meters apart. But actually, you might really make somebody's day by just being friendly to them and saying hi to them. And then the feeling that actually your young person and you get back as well for realizing that you potentially made a real impact on people is huge. But again, it's about having a little bit of human connectedness with other people and saying something just as hi to somebody as you're walking past them can be huge. So I'd really encourage that. It's something really simple, but something that we don't necessarily think about. I've really started doing that now out on my daily walk. I feel like I could just have a tape recorder basically going and playing hello, 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 because I'm saying it all the time to people. But it's brilliant, and you really see the smiles, obviously can't with the masks, but you can see their eyes light up because they're actually really happy that you've spoken to them. And increased responsibilities and tasks as well. And that, a lot of these go right across the age range basically, but increased responsibilities and tasks. So it might be that your child learns a new skill or a task. We all want our children to, learn how to tidy their bedrooms or maybe cook a few meals. This could be the absolute prime time to do that. So it might be that they learn a new skill, they take on some responsibilities around the house. There's a whole array of things that you can do. And, this is not just for teenagers and not just for secondary age children. There's a lot of this can be brought in with younger children as well. So we just think of some of the key points then. Open communication is absolutely vital. Having that time each day, the protected time where you can have those conversations with your child about how are they, what does their day look like, do they need anything from you, do they need any support from you, from their teachers, how are they? It's okay to make mistakes and not have all the answers. It really is, perfectionism doesn't exist as much as we'd all like it to. It really doesn't. And it's okay to make mistakes. We're all human at the end of the day. We're all just trying to do our best. And that's all that we can ask of ourselves. So it's okay if we don't have, all the answers and we do make mistakes. That's okay. Acknowledge feelings. So acknowledging your child's feelings and acknowledging your own feelings as real for you and for your child in that moment is really important. What I would say is there's always a reason for a behaviour, there's always a reason for a feeling. It might be that you have to do a lot of unpicking or unearthing, but actually acknowledge those feelings for yourself and for your child. Be kind to yourselves. We're all doing the best that we can. Just if you can't be kind to yourself, how do we expect anybody else to be kind to us? So just be really kind to yourselves and get active. Get outside, do exercise classes inside, whatever it is, but get active. get those, you know, happy hormones going, you know, for you and for your young person. But get active, get outside whilst you can. So there's some of the key points, and I think now we're going to go to some questions that we might have, Steve.
Yeah, thanks, Lindsay. Thanks for that. Some really, really good points in there, which hopefully you'll find of value, and it'll help you hopefully get through, like I said, this short lockdown with fingers crossed. I've just gone to the chat box. There's a question in there. So, Lindsay, I'm going to ask you to answer this one. So, should I be worried if my teenage children want to be on their own a lot of the time? They're happy to do their daily exercise with us and eat together. Thanks. What do you think about that?
I would say no. A lot of teenagers, to be honest, especially like their own company. You know, they've got social media and they're keeping in contact with friends. You know, obviously, if they're, you know, when you might start to be concerned is if actually they're sort of staying in their bedrooms all the time, they don't want to come out with you, they don't really want to interact with you, they're not sitting down for meal times, you know, they're not really interacting with friends. That's probably when you might start to think, okay, so what's going on here? But actually, you know, teenagers in particular, they like their own company. As long as they get given, you know, some sort of social contact with you. And I think it's great that they're coming out with you for their daily activity. I think that's brilliant. Keep that up. But no, I wouldn't be worried about that at all. Lots of teenagers are like that.
Great. Well, that's the only question we've actually got in there. So I thought I'd just take this opportunity to give you a little bit of information here. So bottom left-hand corner, you can see our email address there. If anyone does have any questions, please feel free to drop us an email. Lindsay or I'll be happy to answer them, or we can, you know, we've got a wealth of different clinicians and roles within our list, and so we can make sure we get the right answer for you. And also, we have got a QR code in the corner there. So if anyone does have a smartphone, you can scan that, and it's just the opportunity to give us a little bit of feedback and just how you found the session. Very short, takes a couple of minutes. I will also copy that link into the chat in a minute. So you can just click on that, and literally it'll just take you 2 seconds, and any feedback that you'd like to give us would be gratefully received. I also just want to say thanks for coming. I know you probably had a busy day one way or the other, whether you've been working or managing kids or doing both. I know it does present lots of challenges, but the fact that you've just took an hour out of your day to focus on, you know, working on the relationship with yourself or your children is really, really important. So that's great. Anything you wanted to add, Lindsay, before we close the session?
I just wanted to say thanks for everybody for coming this evening and listening to what we have to say. I'd really urge that if anybody has got any sort of questions or queries, if you go away this evening and think, oh goodness, I really wish I'd asked that, or if you don't feel, you know, comfortable asking them in this environment, please just contact us at info@irelisten.im and you know, we'll get back to you. Absolutely, that's not a problem at all. But I would also really urge you to take part in the feedback. It literally takes, I would say, probably 2 minutes maximum, and you know, it will really help us going forward with future webinars that we might do. But please just be kind to yourselves and you know, just take a few bits away from today and go forward with your young people. But just remember that actually you're doing the absolute best you can.
Thanks, Lindsay, and I hope you all have a lovely weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.